situation of Syria, as well as speaking to Lebanon to establish full state control over the country, and to speak to us about these efforts and the prospects for stability and security in the region is Tom Barrack, the U.S. Ambassador to Turkey and the U.S. Special Envoy for Syria. Ambassador Barrack will speak from his seat. This is called a conversation, so we will make it a conversation. And once he has delivered his initial remarks, I might ask him one or two questions, but then it is a conversation with all of you, so I encourage you to get your microphones ready, insert your badge, press the button so that you're in the queue, and then I can call upon you to make your contribution to this conversation. So, Ambassador, if I may invite you to speak to us about U.S. policy in the Levant, please.
Thanks, and I first want to give my thanks to His Majesty King Hamad, the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Salman, and Sheikh Nasser. I think being here with a group of professionals like all of you is such a gift, because what we find with one another is what we're missing in our daily dialogue. So my intent is to give you an overview of what President Trump's vision is, without burdening you with a lot of philosophy that you're not going to be interested in. Because what you really want to know is what's happening, where are we going, what does Gaza look like, how's Syria, what's Lebanon doing, and how Turkey and Saudi Arabia relating to what's happening in the middle of Syria. So we'll go to your questions. It's more fruitful. But I think what's really of interest, if you take a model of what President Trump is doing. By the way, his message to me was very simple when we started this, which was he had just a few words. And I said, Mr. President, don't bother. I know, make America great and we'll make the world better. He said, that's really not it. The words are, don't confuse efforts with results. Don't confuse efforts with results. For this man means take bold action. Bold action will create momentum, and momentum will bypass the decades and decades of rust we've had on diplomatic cadence in the Middle East. It's never worked. Since 1916, we've started with what everybody hates to hear about the Balfour Declaration and the Sykes-Picot Agreement, what the nation states dividing up as a result of the colonial mandate just wrapped borders around tribes and flags that weren't intended to be nation states. And we've been recovering for 100 years for this. American policy was also equally at fault. We've had maybe 27 regime changes since World War II. We've had 27 disasters. We're still in the aftermath of most of those disasters. Every time we reach in to create a new paradigm, a new voluntary regime, it hasn't worked. So the exporting of these models is not what this president is interested in. What he's interested in is getting your regional participation and going from a payphone to Starlink and bypassing everything else. So what he's doing is leapfrogging along, what you saw happen on June 21st, change the fabric of how America is going to deal in the Middle East. For the first time, a president actually intervened with power behind a peace and prosperity discussion. Now, the rest of the region has an opportunity to fold in. If you look at what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, it was such an amazing event. To have the world leaders, the Middle East leaders, with the European leaders in the background, all uniting around this president in an array of a declaration of saying, we are all here as a voice against fundamentalist terrorism. Unbelievable. Never happened. What does that mean now? What do we do with it? How do we get there? And the fabric of the countries that we'll discuss, I'll get into with you. But the model is really the Manama model. If you look at what happened in Bahrain, you have 250 years of the family dynasty here. Now, the king has been in power a quarter of a century. But if you look at what's happened by global alliance partnerships, coming back to strength and sovereignty, those are the models that we need to build. Sovereignty is evident. Sovereignty is necessary. But your alliance and your partnerships in this part of the world is essential. And you have a man in Washington who is willing to lead that cause to make it happen. But everybody's got to fold in. Everybody has to give up the scars of the past. It's very difficult to do. But if we don't do it now, we're going to miss an opportunity that will never present itself again. And the Abraham Accords are part of that. What's happening in Gaza is part of that. What's happening in Syria is definitely part of that. And the resistance that's happening in Lebanon is another part of that. So we can talk about these models of what's happening. Syria, with a new regime that came into effect on December 8th. From guerrilla warfare and fatigues to a statesman with 25 million people, a new country, a new opportunity, and President Trump coming on May 10th, and in 10 minutes in Saudi Arabia said, give this man a chance, give this regime a chance. After almost 2 decades of atrocities from Assad, the al-Shara regime steps into place, and in 10 months is speed dating towards something we've never seen. Perhaps even towards the road of normalization with Israel. So we have countries all uniting and saying, great, we've had an issue with Israel since 1928. We had real issues with Israel since 1948. How do we put all that behind us? What's this path of a new Middle East? Middle East has $9 trillion of investable capital. 20 million barrels of oil go out the Straits of Hormuz every day. China buys 11 million of them. You have 30% of all the resources in the world. You have 20% of all the capital in the world. And we're fighting tribes and flags. It's ridiculous. So this president is looking and saying, I'm not going to have boots on the ground. I'm not going to invest U.S. capital in making this happen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be the leader of a bold action. We're going to create momentum. We're going to bolster prosperity and solve these problems from the ground up, not forced from the top down. And that's what's happening in Syria. He lifted the sanctions. We still have the Caesar sanctions. We can talk about that. It's the last one to lift. Senator Rubio got rid of state-sponsored terrorism. It's a look back. It wraps every 6 months, so it comes back December 31st. But this regime has done a very good job in spite of the speed bumps, right? We had problems in Al-Qaeda. We had problems in the West. In Gaza, we had a ceasefire and we have speed bumps. It's going to happen. It's going to happen everywhere. And the only way to extinguish those speed bumps is with momentum and prosperity that has to come from the region. And Turkey, on the other hand, has a different framework. It's a non-Arab Muslim country. It has a stable platform. It's our largest NATO ally besides ourselves. And we just had a love-in between President Erdogan and President Trump. We talked about F-35s, F-16s, S-400s, $100 billion Boeing contract. Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan now on alignment going north. Could be incredible. We have 3.5 million Syrians in Turkey that speak both Arabic and Turkish. And the opportunity is immense. And Syria, in addition to that, is marching towards Israel. We're on our 5th set of discussions with Israel. Border and boundary discussions, de-escalation. You could very quickly have a realignment of a tapestry that we haven't seen in the Middle East. In Bahrain, they have tapestries, and I'll end with this and we'll go to questions, which is called a Sidhu. And we've been friends with the king. The president loves the family and has been friends with the king for 30 years. And one of his people was explaining to me that the Bahraini Sidhu, it has vertical threads and horizontal threads. And the vertical threads are of the strongest kind of thread because that represents the institutions, the military, the education, the healthcare. If you have those things, a society then gets to discussion of religion and politics and then more liberal thoughts at the end. But without education, without security, without stability, without food on the table, nothing happens. The horizontal threads are the diversity of people. This is an example, Sunni and Shias living side by side. We're living in a really difficult zip code. You have the three ethno-religious dominant religions in the world living here, the Middle East. We also have 23 of the most viable foreign terrorist organizations in the world, 18 of them within our zip code. So we're fighting all of these counter winds at a moment where you have a president of the United States who happens to be the leader saying enough. 100 years of this confusion, of these old thoughts, of these old ideas, and people not moving off of them, when you have the most dominant region in the world, if you combine capital with fossil fuels, with resourceful people, has got to end. And that's where he is. That's what we're trying to do.
Ambassador, thank you very much. The list is already long, but I thought I might ask one or two before we open up. And the first one is on Lebanon and your expectations regarding the Lebanese government taking full sovereignty and territorial control. The U.S. has asked for a timeline and a plan. Are you happy with what you have, what you've been given? What else would you like to see and when?
So what I'm going to say, I say lovingly because I'm Lebanese. The Lebanese are fantastic at charming you into submission. They talk, they talk, they talk, and they talk. This is not complicated, right? Let me give you how the President of the United States looks at this. He says, okay, so Hezbollah to America is a foreign terrorist organization. That means the flag on Hezbollah says death to Israel, death to America. We get it. You're not our friend. Hezbollah in Lebanon happens to be a political party also. In addition to that, the French mandate, this confessional system that was invented in the 40s that says the president of Lebanon has to be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister has to be a Sunni, and the speaker has to be a Shia. It was based on population and census. By the way, they haven't had a census for 37 years because, of course, that relates to nothing that's happening now. The Maronites are all living in Paris. The Sunnis have gone someplace else. And the Shias, the Palestinians, and Syrians are the majority of what's Lebanon today. So you have the Taif agreement that came in to say, okay, we're going to redo this. This isn't working. We've had war after war after war. We had a war of Lebanon with the Palestinians. Then we had a war of Lebanon with the Syrians. Then we had a war with Lebanon with the Israelis. Then we had a war of Lebanon with Lebanon. Now we have a war with Lebanon with the Israelis. And the Taif agreement says no more militias. You had a Christian militia to start with. The warlords of the Christian militias are still there, by the way. So Lebanon is a failed state. There's no central bank. The banking system is bust. Riyad Salameh, the head of the central bank, has been indicted all across Europe. There's $60 billion missing from the Lebanese banking system. There's another $75 billion if you take 50 billion of euro bonds plus interest. So you have $130 billion of state debt. They refuse to do a gap assessment. They refuse to deal with the World Bank. They refuse to deal with the IMF. The Electricité du Liban, like the Banque du Liban, is bust, is broke. There's no electricity. You have electricity, you need a private generator. You want water, you need private water. You want education, you need private water. So what's the state? The state is Hezbollah. You go south, Hezbollah gives you water, it gives you an education, gives you a stipend, has 40,000 soldiers. LAF, Lebanese Armed Forces, has 60,000 soldiers. The only problem is the Hezbollah soldiers make $2,200 a month. The LAF soldiers make $275 a month. The Hezbollah soldiers have 15,000, 20,000 rockets and missiles. The LAF soldiers are driving old Jeeps, some AK-47s. So which army is which? What's happening here? So the idea of disarming Hezbollah, in our opinion, it's not reasonable to tell Lebanon forcibly disarm one of your political parties. Everybody's scared to death to go into civil war. The idea is, what can you do to have Hezbollah not utilize those rockets and missiles? You have a moment in time. You have Israel, who is sitting ready to make border and boundary agreements with all its neighbors. And it owes America a favor. On June 21st, when President Trump sent those B-2 bombers in, he did something for Israel that was an incredible reshaping of the region. So our message to Lebanon was, end this. Forget about the confessional system. You can't say the word Israel in Lebanon. I say this lovingly. They still call it Dixie, south of the Litani. It's illegal to have a conversation with Israel. What era are we living in? Do you see what's happening? You have America side by side. You have Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, two of the smartest people in the world working for President Trump. You've seen Tulsi and Doug and James all here today. You have a team that's working for the world. Get online. You do not have time. Israel every day is bombing the south. Why? Because you still have thousands of rockets and missiles that are threatening it. They've been very clear. After October 7th, Israel has said, we are going to defend our boundaries, we're going to defend our borders. You put your weapons down, Hezbollah, and we will not have a problem. We're not going to withdraw, and we're not going to have a problem. So we don't have time for this diplomatic cadence. By the way, the diplomatic cadence was used with Iran. And by the way, I like that the Lebanese leadership today is solid. President Aoun, Nawaf, even Speaker Berry. They're trying, but they're dinosaurs. You have to go from the payphone to Starlink, not the payphone to home phones, not home phones then to cell phones. You've got to go to Starlink. And Starlink is you go from Beirut to Tel Aviv. You have that conversation on the blue line, you have the conversation with Syria, and in 4 months you could end all of this. Is that going to happen?
Ambassador, let me open it up because the list has now gone frightfully long. So I'll get a few people in now so that we open it up a bit, and I might ask a first group of 4 or so to make their interventions. Come back to you, and then we'll take a second group of 4. So first one from Turkey, Sinem Cengiz.
Thank you, Bastian. Ambassador Barrack, there is a clear positive momentum in Turkey-U.S. relations, and your role as an ambassador to Ankara has been very significant in fostering this progress. However, there are still serious differences between Ankara and Washington when it comes to Syria in regards to threats against Turkey's national interests coming from specific actors, either SDF or even Israel. In your capacity as the special envoy to Syria, how do you assess the prospects for narrowing the divergences between two NATO allies and identifying ways for potential convergences?
Thank you very much. We're keeping track of the questions. I'll get a few more in from Egypt and the Young Leaders Group, Sarah El Menawi.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. My question is about long-term stability framework for the Levant. In recent events, Israel has justified repeated cross-border attacks in Syria, framed as protection of the Jewish communities over there. However, these operations not only undermine territorial integrity, but also state sovereignty in Syria, and of course impacting long-term stability in the Levant. From your perspective as a special envoy for Syria, and also for the U.S. holding a permanent seat in the UN Security Council, how do you think the U.S. should balance the protection of vulnerable communities while preserving state sovereignty? And most importantly, how to ensure that